Margie McKenzie, a member of Pilgrim Church's Immigration Group and faithful volunteer at the Migrant Ministry. Welcome, and thank you to everyone joining us, whether online or in person. I hope you enjoy today's discussion on collaborative community for asylum seekers in Oak Park. It's sponsored by Pilgrim's Immigration Group, the Catholic Parishes of Oak Park Migrant Ministry, and the Oak Park Resettlement Task Force. Joining us today are Celine Woznica, one of the lead coordinators of the Catholic Parishes of Oak Park Migrant Ministry, and Nina Doughty, member of the Oak Park Resettlement Task Force. I would like to start with a reading from Leviticus 19, verse 34. The foreigner who lives among you must be treated like one of your own. Love them as you love yourself, for you too were a foreigner in the land of Egypt.
Yeah.
I'm going to start my story. Just a year ago, last May, we were showing the movie Seeking Asylum here at Pilgrim, and I met Celine Woznica. She told us about the migrants living at Chicago District 15 Police Station and how she, along with other women, had been assisting them. I began volunteering with them and have found such joy in serving these newcomers. I have never in my life felt more like a Christian. To tell you more about how that came to be, here is Celine Woznica.
Thank you so much, Margie, and thank you for this opportunity to share with you what has been just an incredible experience for all. Truly the opportunity to love one another as Christ has commanded us, right? My assignment is to give a very brief history of the PSRTs, the Police Station Response Team, and then bring us up to date and talk about the Migrant Ministry, which is an incredible interfaith social action ministry. So the PSRTs, or the Police Station Response Team, began in March of 2023 when the migrants who had been bussed up here by Governor Abbott of Texas in the fall of 2022, when the numbers increased so much that the shelters were filled, so the city began to put them into police stations. This was an incredible experience because they were all organized by WhatsApp chats. It was completely non-hierarchical. People just joined and they offered what they could do. I became involved right around this time in early May of last year for District 15, which is 5701 West Madison, so it's 2 blocks from Austin. As it grew, there became a police station response team for about 25 police stations where they were, where migrants were settled. They weren't settled into all of them, but a good majority of them, with an average of about 20 active people in each police station, 20 active leaders. And other organizations such as churches, schools, community-based organizations have helped in some way. District 15, we provided food, water, medicine, diapers and wipes, formula, blankets, pillows, sleeping mats, tents, clothing, shoes, cellular phones, school supplies, toys, books, laundry help, showers, and English language instruction. We also enrolled them in the local school. The estimate at one point was they had 4,000 migrants sleeping in different police stations. And just as an estimate of what the volunteers brought, they said the food and water was at $2.4 million worth of food and water, almost $1 million worth of supplies. And in terms of person hours, if you charge $60 an hour, it was $2.8 million. So, I mean, it was an incredible volunteer effort. So, where do we go from here? So in District 15, and I know that Pilgrim was really involved in this, which was wonderful. In District 15, one of the issues that concerned me was showers. So as a member of the Catholic Parishes of Oak Park, I implemented this new strategy, which is called NAG-vocate. And I NAG-vocated to get allow the migrants to take showers at at the closed rectory of St. Catherine, St. Lucy's. We were once 4 parishes, now we're 2 parishes. We have 1 pastor. That rectory was not being used. It was being used in the evenings for housing forward for emergency shelter, but during the day it was free. So we're able to bring the migrants. At first, we would drive them, but then they started walking, and it was just a wonderful experience. They could take showers. We provided clothes, new underwear, new socks, breakfast, etc. It was great, and I'm talking fast because we got a lot to talk about. It was great going into the, all summer and then going into the fall. But as the numbers increased at District 15 and the needs increased because it began getting cooler, we needed to pass out coats, we needed to pass out blankets, we needed to have, bigger shoes. Then we spilled into the church. Okay, so what was our baptistry? Now the baptisms were in the front of the congregation, but used to be a baptistry, became famous footwear. The area where in the back where the choir would warm up, that became where we distributed blankets and coats. The migrants would wait in the church because it was cool until we started. They would move to the rectory for breakfast and showers. Then they would move back for. We just totally outgrew it. Then the former St. Edmund's school opened up because the children's school had to move out because of issues with the boiler and stuff. So they moved out on November 19th, and we moved in on December 19th. And since then, it's been just an incredible experience because we have so much more room. And now with more room, we can have whole former classrooms dedicated to certain areas. Like we have a room just for shoes, blankets, and toiletries. We had a room just for coats. But now that the need for coats is going down, we're moving the men's clothing, men's and boys into there. We had 1 room just for clothing. We had 1 room that's just a playroom. It's just the kids are in heaven. We used to serve breakfast there, but we had to move upstairs to the gym so we could spread out more when the measles epidemic started, because everybody has to wear masks, and if they're going to have breakfast, they've got to take the masks off, so we could separate them into tables. So that's what we're doing right now. It's not just what we call a free store. We also have ESL classes on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. We began on Saturdays. The first Saturday, nobody showed up. The second Saturday, we spread the news that you can bring your children. We had 23, and then yesterday we filled up at 30. And it's great, it's fun, and it's all run by volunteers. We should get an ARP award. Because who else is available on Tuesdays? I know we're not doing this anymore, but the point is that we're all retired people, and they bring life skills, so it's great. So the woman who's running the ESL program is a retired ESL who ran ESL programs and had the master's in ESL. We also provide, we're going to be writing social services through Rincon Family Services, beginnings of legal services. We have healthcare on Tuesday mornings. We have the team from Loyola comes in. And another part of this ministry, more upstream, preventive, is our work to resettle and accommodate families. We are accompanying 8 families right now with the goal of accompanying 10 total. So 2 more in the pipelines. And this is with assistance from Catholic Charities, where they help pay the rent for 6 months. But then, we find the apartments, we do the accompaniment, the mentoring, we help them set up their NICOR and their ComEd, and just help them enroll their kids in school. We have a whole mentor team for that. But it's ever evolving, ever changing. I cannot stress enough the beauty of the interfaith aspect of this. Partnership with Pilgrim, with First United, with the Temple, with Euclid Methodist. I just love it. I was sharing earlier that, growing up Catholic in a certain area, a mixed marriage is when you married somebody from another parish. And so now to be able to work I just feel like I am more in love with God and more in awe of our Creator because now I have all these other spiritual homes. So the migrant ministry has been an incredible experience. Not only for, and I should say numbers, if people are interested in numbers, we estimate that we have served since last May between 8 and 10,000 migrants. We average about 350 right now coming in, more on Tuesdays than on Thursdays because our distribution and donation day is Monday, so we're putting more supplies on Tuesday, and they know that. It got a little bit quieter Monday, Tuesday, January, February, March, but now our numbers are going back up. They are very recent arrivals, just 3 or 4 days ago. The vast majority from Venezuela, increasingly more from Ecuador, and of course, always from Colombia. So I think I'm up to my 12 minutes, so I'm passing it on.
Thank you, Celine. And now to tell you more about the resettlement phase, please welcome Nina Doughty, member of the Oak Park Resettlement Task Force.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me. So yeah, my name is Nina. I'm actually one of the newest members of the task force. I joined back in January. But just a little bit of history about kind of how the task force came to be and what we've been able to accomplish in the last few months. It really was an emergency mutual aid effort set up because we realized, in terms of the hierarchy of needs, that permanent housing is one of the most important aspects, so that they don't end up back on the street. And then it's also one of the most difficult things to navigate, especially in this market. Chicago is one of the most expensive cost of living and real estate markets in the country, which we acknowledge. But just a little bit of background about the task force is it really originated from this police station response. It was a lot of those key stakeholders that Celine talked about really kind of came up with this idea that we need to step up because they were able to move to the YMCA, the West Suburban YMCA in Oak Park, and then also the Carlton in downtown Oak Park, and then the men's shelter at Grace Episcopal. And then Euclid United Methodist also took on a few families of their own. That's where, once they left the police stations back in November because of the weather and the freezing temperatures, those were the locations for the shelters in the Oak Park area, okay? And I just want to commend Chicago because, living here, commend Oak Park. Living here, I've been kind of keeping track of the whole situation in the Chicagoland area and working with other groups as well. But Oak Park is the largest and primarily the only suburb other than one small suburb in the south suburbs that has stepped up and taken on these refugees in their own shelters. Okay, so I think everyone should give themselves like a round of applause as like living in the Oak Park area, because otherwise it's only been Chicago, and like this area has really, really stepped up. So I think people need to know that that's extremely commendable. So the village was able to, secure housing between a myriad of grants for these temporary shelters. Primarily the funding came from the state of Illinois, from Cook County, and then also from the village of Oak Park itself. But they only had, they moved in November, and the hard deadline to be out for, a myriad of reasons was the end of February. Okay, so this task force originated back in January because they said, hey, they've got to be out, and it's going to be the middle of winter, so we need to get on this now. So the task force got together, came up with they did a market analysis about realistically what rents were going to cost, for certain size families. They went to everyone in the shelters, everyone who was eligible for these resources, and said like, hey, is this something you're interested in? Because these are all, adults. They have the option to work with us or not. And actually a decent amount of people decided to go on their own and find their own apartments. And that is, their right to do so. But they wanted to make sure everyone had the option that was living in this situation at the time. So once, they kind of did this analysis, got a list of who all wanted to work with the village and the task force, we kind of got to work on coming up with a program. We partnered with the community of congregations, which Colin is, the head of, and he's been wonderful to work with. And they have been the fiscal agent, who is the nonprofit that has been kind of like our bank, if you will. So accepting donations, but also how we've been able to pay the landlords for this process. So, thanks to them as well, because they've been wonderful to work with. And then we all have kind of our little designated roles on the task force. My role was I stepped up back at the end of January, beginning of February, to become the lead lease finder, if you will, and landlord liaison. So I probably cold called on over 1,000 units. And yeah, so it was really a labor of love, and it was a community, it was a group effort though too, because a bunch of people from the task force, it's a lot of making connections and saying, who knows this landlord? Do you know this one? Because a lot of people would not work with us because, these refugees, they have no credit history. They have no ability to do a background check because they don't have social security numbers. And they have no jobs, so they have no pay stubs. So those factors right there meant most of the landlords were going to slam the door in my face and didn't even want to talk to me, okay? So we realized that the only way this was going to work was if we could supply a whole year of rent, an entire lease. If we didn't have an entire lease, no one was going to work with us. Even the 6 months, it's good, but that leaves another 6 months of rent that was going to be a responsibility for the refugees. And with the state of how long it's taking people to get their work permits, and even when they do get their work permits, it's extremely expensive to live here, even when we're doing our best to find, apartments that are affordable. So moving forward, we had this kind of collaborative effort where we would find leases, we would help them, work with the landlords to get them signed, and the tenants all sign on their own, and they're responsible for paying for their own food and their own utilities. And it's a way to help them build credit and also, have some responsibility and some pride in, their home and everything. But on top of that, we also have had a huge donation effort with storage at the Boulevard Church, where people have donated items like household goods, because when you think about it, they're moving in, they have literally nothing. So you need a whole household worth of things. In terms of furniture, majority of our furniture, we partnered with the Chicago Furniture Bank, where $400 of the money that we raised would pay for an entire apartment's worth of donated furniture. And that was a really big thing with the landlords too, because all that furniture has also been treated, and it's safe to bring in, because you worry about bugs and things like that, because realistically that's a big issue in a lot of these homes in this low income bracket. So it's very much been a collaborative effort. We ended up helping home over 200 refugees, primarily, yes, it's been in over 30 units. We've also had some parsonages with local parishes for some of our larger families. So we had a family of 10, we had a family of 8. Those are really hard to place in apartments because they need a lot of space. Majority of where these families have been located from, I tried to start locally and then had to work out. Unfortunately, we didn't have many landlords in the Oak Park area that were willing to work with us, which was really disheartening and frustrating, because we wanted to try to keep people close to have as much support as possible, but you have to go where people are willing to work with them. And we didn't also want to work with just any landlords. We wanted to work with people who we're going to care about this population and be understanding, because there are some additional hurdles. There's a language barrier. There's, a lot of people have never lived in apartments before in communal living, so helping with that. So we really found a great group of some larger landlords that were willing to not only work with us, but work with the people and, help them feel really comfortable in their living situations. And we do have a decent amount of smaller, boutique landlords, as we say, but we came up with a good group. So we have a couple cohorts. So there is a very small handful. I would say we only have like 4, maybe 5 units in Oak Park total. And I think there's like 2 or 3 in Forest Park. The rest are in the city of Chicago or in Cicero. I think we have 1 in Evanston. But we have, a pretty decent Cicero cohort, so that's pretty close. We have a pretty decent sized Hyde Park cohort where there's a lot of units down there altogether. There's a really large Rogers Park, Edgewater cohort up there, and then kind of a smattering across the city as well. But those are areas that are welcoming to immigrants, and that are willing to work with people and, that are new to this country. And so in terms of kind of moving forward, we have, like we said, we have a huge volunteer network that's been working on bringing them to storage to pick out all their household goods and helping them transport it back to their new homes and really making these homes for them. We have we call it the Compañero or companion program, where families have been matched with somebody local, a volunteer who's really willing to help them kind of navigate what it's like to, these are neighborhoods they've never been to, they don't know, so really helping them kind of like dig in and become members of their new community, finding like their food banks, finding, their local health care that they can get to close. Majority of them are either walking or taking public transportation. That was another really important thing when we were choosing where to locate people, was we wanted it to be somewhere where they could easily access public transit so that they could get to a lot of areas of the city and beyond for jobs. We didn't want them to be, isolated in an area without public transportation. And then we also, as Celine had mentioned, one of our leads of the task force has partnered with legal aid, which has been provided through some of the Village of Oak Park funding to help people start putting together their asylum cases and things like that. So they've been having a lot of legal clinics back in this area. They've been holding at Cavalry to help people, get legal representation, because in order to apply for TPS and asylum, it has to go through a lawyer. And so many, we have this cohort here, but there's over 30,000 of these refugees in the Chicagoland area. So, this market is very saturated for people looking for assistance, both legally and with housing and with food and things like that. And like she said, there's new people arriving every day. So there's still this huge need. We also, she mentioned Rincon. Rincon is a social services group that very recently the task force started partnering with, and they were able to take on an original group of 10 families. We prioritized those with very young children, our pregnant moms, and then we have a couple gentlemen with some pretty grave health concerns. So we wanted to make sure that those families got the original, social services support to help set them up with things like healthcare, getting them to appointments. But our volunteers have really been doing a ton of heavy lifting. Our companions, helping the kids get enrolled in their new schools. They have the option to stay if they're close enough in the Oak Park schools for the remainder of the school year. But a lot of them, because they're so far, that's just not feasible. So getting them enrolled in their new school and kind of helping them build that community from that sense. But just anything you do when you move to a new area, it's very all-consuming. In terms of how people can help, I know that that's been a big question, is how we as a community can continue to help not only the original cohort that was here, but also, like Celine said, there's so many people that still need help, and a lot of new people that are starting from scratch that don't have these same kind of supports set in place. There's a huge need for jobs. That is probably the biggest need right now. So I'm gonna make sure that we are able to get, there was a QR code that I don't think made it onto the flyers, but we'll get it either emailed out or passed out. But there's a job board where you can basically submit interest for something you need done either at your house or in your community. Like, so there's things like painting, gardening, moving and transporting, large furniture or objects, helping clean up and clean out your house, clean out your garage, childcare, healthcare, senior care, companions. Like there's lots of things. People also have other skills. Like some of the refugees have decent, computer skills and things like that too. So with electronics and things like that. So you can submit your, interest or request, and then the woman who runs the job board kind of looks through and sees who would be a good match and then contacts you and can kind of help set up. But that is one of the big, and there's guidelines in terms on, what things, cost or how people should be paid and things like that. So it's a way to hire people with dignity and help them, because that's their biggest thing right now, is finding ways to work and pay for, they have other bills other than just their utilities and their food. And then we still have originally, so like I said, we were able to find homes for the YMCA, the people at the YMCA, the Carlton, the men's shelter at Grace. And we call it the men's shelter because that's where all the men who were considered single men at the time were staying, because they weren't eligible to stay in the family shelters. But most of them came here and they have families, either they were staying in other areas of the city or they were on their way here. So we were able to help them as well. And then we were able to get funding from both the village and the county and the state to help the Euclid shelter as well. So we actually this past weekend just finished helping them move into their first home, or their last home. We were able to get them all into homes as well. We did have some people, like I said in the beginning, we said we went out and surveyed who was interested. We had some, people who originally said no, come back and say yes. So there is still a need for some additional funding. If anyone is interested in also donating, the Community of Congregations is still accepting donations. Some of like I said, we paid most of the leases up front in one lump sum, but some of the landlords could only accept 6 months. They're like, oh, a whole year is too much. So we do have we wanted to help everyone that was eligible. So there is a couple of payments we do need to make in September that we are still raising money for, but primarily we were able to do it all with the original funding. And I know some people have asked, it was over $1 million for these leases. So it was the task force raised on its own between the fundraiser we had at Roberts West Side, and then also through individual contributions, we raised over $100,000. And then the remainder came from the state, the county, and then the village. So, but those are ways people can help. We also, you can join if anyone's on Facebook, there is a group out there called Oak Park Supports /Apoya, and that is a great way. There's always volunteer opportunities or donation opportunities for household goods, things like that, updates that you can join as well. And I encourage people to get involved because, like you said, being able to help has been one of the most rewarding aspects of anything I've ever done. And I'm an emergency room nurse by trade, but just being able to work with all these extremely wonderful people, both from the volunteer side and from the family side, it's been an extremely rewarding experience. So I do encourage people to get involved too, if that's something that you're interested in. Thank you.
I did remember to print 2 of the handouts, so there is a little bit of information about volunteering. Did anyone have any questions for Nina or Celine? Sally?
What do you anticipate will happen this summer with migrants coming?
So Sally's question is, what do we anticipate what will happen this summer with migrants coming? Yeah. We'll see. I mean, we've been pivoting since day one on this, okay? And it's always, there's just, we don't know in the sense that the migrants there's seasonal differences. Last year in 2023, January, February, March, the numbers were lower, and then they increased in April. Same thing happened here in 2024. January, February, March, numbers were a little bit lower, and now they're they're surging again, but they're not coming from Texas, okay? They're coming from crossing in Arizona, and they're crossing in California. For a variety of reasons. Governor Abbott likes to credit his Operation Lone Star, but actually, if you read the papers, it's more of an effort on the part of the Mexican government that is that are dealing with the migrants in different ways, and they are crossing more in Arizona and in California. I have been trying to find out how many more buses are arriving. If you go on what's called the city dashboard, you can see that how many buses have arrived, how many are currently arriving, how many people are waiting in shelters, how many at O'Hare, how many at the landing zones, da, 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 da. It has not been updated since April 23rd. So I don't know. You've been reading that migrants are being dropped off in Wilmette because the bus companies that bring them up get fined if they land at what's called the landing zone, which is on Ogden, 3300 West Ogden. And if they come in outside of the time frame of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., they're going to get fined. So they drop them off in Wilmette because the idea is to be a bother, you know. But, and Wilmette has been accepting them, but I can't even find in the news because I was preparing for this. Now, okay, how many are appearing in Wilmette? I know that there were a lot at the end of April, but I don't know how many recently. Yet, we're receiving a lot more at Centro San Edmundo, and I really want to emphasize that Centro San Edmundo is St. Edmund Center in Spanish. It's the new name for the St. Edmund School. I just want to emphasize how wonderful it is to work with the Resettlement Task Force, because that is upstream, permanent, long range, and we can do immediate needs. So it's nice that we can partner in that sense. But I don't know. I can say that we're preparing for many more migrants to come in. And you may have heard that Mayor Johnson has asked that the Social Club or the Standard Club, which is at Plymouth and Jackson, right downtown, that be closed because for the Democratic National Convention, and the people moved out to 3300 South, I don't remember now, I don't remember, but on the south side, and that alderperson is arguing. But the point is, they think a lot more are going to come in. We just are preparing.
So my question sort of followed up on that. How, you have any idea how long your organizations are going to need to keep being organized? How much more money will be needed? Because Cook County and the state's grant money, a lot of that came from COVID funding, and that isn't anymore. How much longer does this apparatus need to remain strong and big?
So Sue's question was, how much longer do we think that this is going to carry on? How long do we need to keep finding funds? How long are we going to need to do this?
So, you know, Celine put it really well. We have kind of a tandem task force here in terms of like long-term and short-term. Our goal was to home this specific cohort. Okay, so if the refugees didn't belong, quote unquote, to this original group that was from the District 15 police station that then moved to the temporary shelters, they weren't eligible for this funding. So it's our task force is effectively done. We opened up to help this Euclid group because they were a bigger group in Oak Park as well, and we really wanted to kind of round it out to this, you know, Oak Park community and try to help as many people as we could. But our portion, if you will, we're still helping on the social services side, but as far as funding, we're done. So we're trying to collect this little bit for these kind of like stragglers that we didn't want to say no to. You know, we could have been like, oh, sorry, you missed the boat. But they were eligible in theory for the same services, so we didn't want to say no to them. So we used some of the funding that we had up front to get them into houses now, and we're just kind of raising. And when I say we need a little bit more, I want to say it's probably it's the equivalent of one lease. So I think it's about $20,000 that we need to raise between now and September. So we have time, but any little bit that people are willing to contribute helps. Because like I said, we didn't want to say no to these families that came to us late. But as far as what we're doing, it's more of social support and helping people kind of like dig into their permanent long-term housing. But I can let Celine answer a little bit more about her.
And Celine doesn't have the faintest idea. But I'm worried about it, because in the year that I've been involved in this, I have learned to turn everything over to the Holy Spirit. I mean, it's just over and over again, she has come through. There is talk of us becoming a 501c3, because at this point, it is a ministry of the Catholic Parishes of Oak Park, okay? If we become a 501c3, we can write more grants, we could do more detailed budgeting. Those of you who do parish budgets, you know, you could just have so many, you know, subgroups and stuff like that. So we don't know. We are going ahead and we're storing the winter boots that didn't go. We're storing them and think that we, you know, will still be around next winter. And if we're not, then we pass it around. But okay, so have you heard about what Rincon Family Services is doing? Rincon now wants to open up a branch office at St. Ed's. So that's wonderful, okay? So that's going to be now services for the people who are settled here as well as the people who are coming in. We're just marching ahead with the belief that we're going to continue. But you know, who do I get inspired from? What keeps me marching ahead and saying, yeah, let's do it? The people, the migrants themselves. Those of you who have volunteered with us, aren't you just in awe of them? They never gave up. They never gave up going through that Darien Gap. That Darien Gap is awful. 66 miles of jungle that is so awful that the Pan American Highway doesn't even go through it. It's got all sorts of insects and animals, and it floods, and there's rivers, and there's, you know, I speak Spanish, so, and I have luckily been able to enter to a level of confidence that they share some of the stories. We don't ask them to share stories because, you know, that's a professional. They're awful. They experience so much death and having to leave family members because this family member broke a foot and can't continue. So they have to leave that family member in the arms of the United Nations or something. You know, there's different social groups there. I can't worry about. I'm just going to march ahead as if we're going to be there, okay? Because we're inspired. We're led by the Holy Spirit, and we're inspired by Mayelis, who walked that 3,000-mile. All the various countries, the 7 countries, depends if they're leaving from Venezuela or Colombia or Venezuela, with a 9-year-old blind child and a toddler. How did she walk that with a toddler? Or Mariachi, who walked with a single mom with 4 kids. Moms up here can't go to the Jewel with 4 kids. And she walked 3,000 miles. So, you know, I'm not. When we start writing grants, I'll start getting it.
My other question had to do with the other already established refugee settlement agencies that are here, like Refugee One and Heartland. Are they just overwhelmed, or is it that they won't handle these people?
The question was, how come the other refugee agencies in place, like Exodus and Refugee One, are they also part of this?
Well, I had the privilege of working with Heartland Alliance, and I've worked with the 5 refugee resettlement agencies here in a previous life. And they only work with refugees being settled through the State Department in collaboration with the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. So there's an argument whether or not our new neighbors are refugees or not. Some people say they are refugees because they cannot go back to Venezuela. Other people say we can't really call them refugees until they get that designation from the UNHCR. Okay, so that's just an argument back and forth. But you know, the refugee resettlement agencies get money for every refugee that they resettle. And now that the Trump administration is over and the Biden administration is allowing refugees back in, they're busy.
Yeah, I think.
Cleo?
Actually, I just wanted to tell you about the FORA organization. Are you familiar with that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Are you familiar with the FORA organization?
Fora organization? No, but I'd love to hear about it.
Forging Opportunities for Refugees in America, I guess, or something like that. And they are up in the Rogers Park area.
Okay.
So since you have several up there, and they're offering tutoring
Oh,
for the children.
forging opportunities for
Refugees.
Fora. Okay, and they're up in Rogers Park, and that would be good to connect. Yeah, no, that's great. We've been looking for kind of local groups to help connect people too, so I really appreciate that.
And worked in school, at least during the time they came up here, or behind in American schools that really need that help. So it's a really wonderful volunteer organization, and they're right up there, and they're just moving into they bought what was a library, so they have bigger space now to add more.
And yes, you were saying that they're offering tutoring for students as well. That's great. That's great.
That's the main thing, you know,
Got it.
because they're moving their whole tutoring out into that area.
That's great. Thank you.
And they've been in that area, and they've got some things coming up, like their open house for that, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the cards this morning, but
Oh, that's okay.
you might be interested in going.
I will definitely look into that. Thank you so much. Did you have a question?
Yes, with regard to the affordable housing shortage that you mentioned, I know from homeless service organizations that have been serving the area for a while that actually got dramatically worse during COVID and coming out of the pandemic for folks who are already here. And so I'm wondering what conversations you've been in with homeless service organizations, and is there any larger learning that we could have about advocating for more affordable housing, no matter who needs it? Because the heartbreaking thing is we've got an influx of new people and also folks who've been here for a long time who also can't get housing. So how do we think about that in a broader, more compassionate way?
Yeah, that's actually something we've been discussing at length. I'll repeat the comment and the question. So she was asking about working with other established local organizations that help those that are looking to seek affordable housing in the area, and how the affordable housing has gotten worse since COVID in terms of affordability, and how there's already people here that are seeking affordable housing, and how we can take some takeaways from this experience and help everyone looking for affordable housing. So to answer your question, yes, we've been actually partnering very closely with Housing Forward, which is a local authority in the western suburbs here out of Maywood. But they've been a close partner with us, and we've learned a lot from them, and they've learned a lot from our experiences as well. The hard thing is that, without getting too political, just the cost of living and inflation in terms of rent has gone through the roof in the last 4 years. I live in Forest Park, was previously living and renting in Chicago, in the city of Chicago, for 8 years prior to that. And even since we moved 4 years ago, the cost of rent is just across the board. There are actually some landlords now are starting to take bids for rent prices. So people have to bid against each other, like when you're purchasing a house, for how much they are going to rent. Like, it's getting obscene. So kind of some takeaways, and we also, I've come across a lot of slumlords too, and luckily we had a little bit of privilege in that there was some time, so I didn't have to say yes to everybody who was willing to work with us. We turned down some landlords for a variety of reasons. People who, when I talked about not being good partners, that we wanted good landlords that were going to be partners with people. You read horror stories right now about so many families. I won't even get into they've gone through so much trauma getting here. We don't want to re-traumatize them by putting them in permanent housing, where it's not only going to make them potentially ill, be in a dangerous neighborhood. It had some people in pretty rough neighborhoods on the west and south side offer us options. And I said, you know what, I'm not gonna knowingly put families in a dangerous situation, especially because most of our families have young children. So the biggest thing is working with landlords, especially local landlords, and trying to help them understand, you know, the story of where, when you connect on a human level with people and you say, you know, these are good people, they're really hardworking, like the amount of gumption that it takes to walk not just the 3,000 miles to get here, but then take another 1,000-mile bus ride. I had one landlord who primarily works in, you know, the Section 8 housing sector, and he told me, he's actually become a good friend of mine. He said, when I'm going to bet on somebody, I want to bet on that person who had the wherewithal and the strength to leave that situation and get their butt up here. That person's going to make it. You know, that's who I want to bet on. And so when we were working with people, we were trying to really convey like how amazing the opportunity has been to work with a lot of these families. But at the end of the day, we were talking before, you know, everyone got here today, like having a safe place to live and food on the table and clothing, like these are basic human rights. And at the end of the day, we're all, you know, we may come from different backgrounds, we may come from different countries. Here in America, 99.9% of us all came from other countries, and we were sharing some of our, you know, lineage stories about how our ancestors came here and, you know, how they got here. And I think a lot of us really need to get back to that. You know, everyone deserves to feel safe in their home, and everyone deserves the respect of being, you know, a human. And when you really get back to that kind of like visceral level, it makes it a lot easier to connect with people and help people realize that they want to help too. So that's one of the big takeaways, is connecting with landlords and people in positions of power, connecting with people who have the ability to write grants and people in, you know, government positions, trying to connect with them on that human level and say, you know, this isn't just a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. These aren't just, you know, they're people. And when you can kind of get to that human level, that's when I think people really want to help.
Can I just say one thing real quickly? Okay, so I'm wearing a vintage crop t-shirt, okay? I think I went for having the old, very old crop t-shirt. I just want to share this in a few minutes that we have left. Today for the crop walk, there are a good number of migrants will be marching because they recognize that Church World Service fed them on the way up here. So when we made that link, they said, well, we can help. And so I bought a whole bunch of little Venezuelan flags, Ecuadorian flags, and Colombian flags. So if you come back for the crop walk and you start in your parking lot, there'll be a number of migrants waving flags. And yesterday I got a text from one of them and said, can you get some face paint so we can paint the Venezuelan flag on our cheeks?
J-Man.
What steps need to be taken for your organization, I know organization, quote unquote, for your organization to continue?
She asked, what steps need to be taken for the organization to continue?
That's a great question, thank you. I actually have landlords, you know, like I said, we've kind of created a reputation in the housing community, but also I have people still calling me and texting me all the time wanting to work with us, and it's budget. Like we said, there's 30,000 people here that we would love to help, and I would love to continue, and there's landlords who want to work with them. It really comes down to money. So I think that, you know, it's been a long, very time-consuming road for the last couple of months, but we have a lot of volunteers that have the gumption that would love to continue. But from our task force perspective, we would have to find a way to raise the money, because like the average lease around here for a one-bedroom, I want to say is about $14,000 minimum, and that's a cheap lease. So, you know, for every home, we need to raise a large amount of money, and that's just for a 1-bedroom. A lot of these families they need 2, 3, 4-bedroom places because they have a lot of people. So it is something that we're exploring to try to see if there are more private grants. Unfortunately, you know, again, without getting too political, there's a lot of hoop jumping and things to get this government money. If we could find private groups that were willing, we've had a lot of private citizens come to us and say, I want to fund a lease. And I'm like, God bless them. I wish I had $14,000 to give away. But, you know, like, I'm here for it, and I love to continue helping people. And like I said, we have those established relationships now, and there are landlords that want to keep working with us, and new ones coming out of the woodwork. They're like, hey, my friend worked with you, and they had a great experience. I'd like to work with you too. And I'm like, yay, I just need the money. So yeah, it's not something that we've rolled out. It's just trying to find a way to get the funding.
Thank you all for coming and bringing your questions. And we have handouts printed out for you on the chairs. Any last words for us, Celine?
No, just thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for all that you're doing as well to welcome our new neighbors.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, we're off.
Now we can misbehave.
Yes. No, we can misbehave. Are we still online? No.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great.
On the side of that, there is a power button, turn it off.
Got it?
I used to have things.
Oh, sure. These. Did you find it? Okay.